The following program, NORML Show Live, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate for the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate or encourage any illegal activity and advise all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws by visiting NORML.org, NORML.org. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers of NORML Show Live are their own and do not necessarily reflect the philosophy and policies of NORML. Listener discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws presents NORML Show Live, Marijuana Nation. Now, here's your host, NORML's Outreach Coordinator, Radical Russ Belville.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is Monday, February 22nd, 2010, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us here at NORML Show Live, your source for news, information, talk, conversation, and more by, for, and about the cannabis community. Got all sorts of stuff coming up on today's show to tell you about, but before we get to that, let's introduce my good friend and half-half sister, Cannabis Carrie.
Hi, Russ. How's it going today?
Oh, we're doing very, very good down here in beautiful Portland, Oregon. The weekend was completely sunny. We approached 60 degrees this weekend. Had a good time with old Roscoe. How are things for you and my lovely wife out on the coast?
Words can't even express how beautiful the area that we live in. We got to do a lot of hiking and a lot of beach time and a lot of just staring at the ocean.
Oh, staring at the ocean. A beautiful way to pass the day. And I sure hope you had a good 420 break now and then while you watched. Carrie joins us right after the first break for our cannabis news, and this comes from CannabisFantastic.com, her excellent website on analysis and reporting on the cannabis community. What are we looking forward to in the headlines today?
Well, today we're going to visit two different protests across the country, one in Denver, and we're going to also go to another medical marijuana state where a councilman got into some hot water over cannabis. So we'll talk about those and a few other things coming up on the news. All
right, check that out on the news coming right after this first break. Thanks, Carrie. We'll get you back right after the break. Coming up also on today's show, we've got our daily Toker tunes. Today is Roots Monday, so we've got a great Roots Monday tune that Carrie has picked out especially to celebrate the most recent Vancouver Winter Olympics. In our Behind the Headlines segment, Paul Armentano, NORML's deputy director, will be joining us to give further analysis on the recent report by the California Senate. This was a report that was legislated back in 2000, and they've just now come out with the results of their study. Very interesting results indeed. Paul Armentano will tell us all about it. And at the end of the show, I've got another exhibit of reefer madness, this time from Forbes magazine, the magazine of money and business, with a Dr. Lipson, who I've never heard of before, saying all sorts of untrue things about medical marijuana. So we'll debunk that at the end of the show. And a special note for tomorrow's show. On tomorrow's show, we'll be speaking with Allison Holcomb from the ACLU of Washington and representatives from Sensible Washington who are proposing the I-1068 initiative to legalize marijuana in the state of Washington. In a shocking development this weekend, the ACLU of Washington has said they will not support I-1068. We'll get to the center of the controversy on tomorrow's show with our discussions with Allison and a representative from the I-1068 camp. It's NORML Show Live, Voice of the Marijuana Nation. We'll be right back with your marijuana headlines. Please stick around and tell your friends.
You're listening to NORML Show Live, the voice of the Marijuana Nation.
Hello, I'm Paul Stanford from the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation, or THCF. Medical marijuana is legal in 13 states today, and THCF has clinics in 8 of those states. Our doctors help qualified patients obtain an authorization for medical marijuana in their state. Patients are eligible for medical marijuana with a history of either severe chronic pain and or nausea, cancer, AIDS or HIV, hepatitis, glaucoma, seizure disorders like epilepsy, chronic muscle spasms such as multiple sclerosis or asthma, neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, and gastrointestinal disorders like IBS or Crohn's disease. If you or someone you know has one of these conditions, our doctors will help you obtain a permit for medical marijuana. THCF Medical Clinics has offices in Washington State, Oregon, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Nevada, Montana, and now Michigan. Call 1-800-723-0188 or go to the web at hemp.org or 1-800-723-0188.
Been busted? Need a lawyer? Call the NORML Legal Committee for an attorney near you. Find one at NORML.org. Remember, attorneys are cheaper than a lifelong criminal drug record.
It's that freedom. I'm free to...
Medical marijuana, industrial hemp, consumer cannabis. It's time for this week's NORML News with Cannabis Carrie.
President Barack Obama was fundraising in Denver on Thursday in support of U.S. Senator Michael Bennet. Medical marijuana advocates who are upset with the recent raid of a Denver man's home medical marijuana grow operation took advantage of his visit by staging a protest outside of the Fillmore Auditorium where the president spoke. Advocates held signs and chanted "Cannabis is safe medicine," and others held signs reminding the president of his October 2009 memo that instructed federal agents to refrain from focusing resources on arresting medical marijuana patients and providers. Brian Vicente, the director of Sensible Colorado, whose group was there to protest, said to the Daily Denver News that the DEA raids are out of compliance both with the will of Colorado voters and that of the White House. He says that the recent armed raid and arrest of licensed medical marijuana provider Chris Barkowitz highlights the rogue nature of the regional DEA office, and he wants to make President Obama aware of the agent's actions. The medical marijuana advocates that were protesting were joined by environmental advocates and various others vying for the president's attention.
Well, this is something that John Doe from John Doe Radio has reported to us as well. He was at that protest, and when we get him on Thursday for our Daily Toker Tunes, we'll ask him about that and how the protest went. But again, this is a shocking development from the Obama administration, who had just recently promised that there would be no more raids on medical marijuana. This was just this year, or just last year, excuse me, when the Attorney General, that would be the Attorney General Eric Holder, mentioned that they would follow what the president had said throughout the campaign. And the president throughout the campaign had said this.
What I'm not going to be doing, is using Justice Department resources to try to circumvent state laws on this issue, simply because I want folks to be investigating violent crimes and potential terrorism. We've got a lot of things for our law enforcement officers to deal with.
So apparently with the new raids in Denver and the actions that took place in Los Angeles just recently, we've solved all of our violent crimes and terrorism, apparently.
The group Sensible Missouri and other cannabis reform advocates met with lawmakers in Jefferson City last Wednesday to make a case that Missouri should be the next state to legalize medical marijuana. All of the people who are in the Sensible Missouri group are potential patients if Missouri's new medical marijuana law is passed. The advocates were there to tell lawmakers that they support a bill introduced by House Democrat Kate Miners last month that would allow doctors to prescribe an adequate supply of cannabis to patients diagnosed with debilitating medical conditions. The bill, HB 1670, has been introduced on the floor and would place the issue before voters in 2011. The bill has more support than similar bills that had been previously introduced, and even a few Republicans have signed on. In a previous session when the bill had only Democrat sponsorship, Republican Speaker of the House, Ron Richards, failed to assign it to a committee. Under current Missouri law, doctors are allowed to prescribe cocaine, opium, methamphetamine, and hundreds of other recognized addictive drugs, but not marijuana. In a report from Brandon Ryan, president of Kansas City NORML, the focus of the group was to plead with House Speaker Ron Richards to assign the bill and allow voters to decide its fate. While walking Representative Richards quickly to the door to enter the Assembly session about to begin, Ryan pleaded for him to assign Bill 1670 for the sake of his father, who had multiple sclerosis, and the rest of the Missouri chronically ill. Richards told the Missouri Citizen to go away as he hurried through the doors to the Assembly.
Go away, huh? That's the way we're going to get treated now. Look, we're not going anywhere. We've been here for a while, and we're going to continue to be here fighting for the rights of all Americans, not just the sick and disabled, but all Americans, to use cannabis. It's part of our American heritage, and I can't find any place in the Constitution that says that we're not allowed to grow the plants of the earth. If this is not a 9th and 10th Amendment issue, I don't know what is. The good news is we got plenty of great activists in the state of Missouri who are working hard on this, including Brandon Ryan and Kansas City NORML. You can reach Kansas City NORML at kcnormal.org or 888-KC-NORML on the telephone. But there's also Missouri NORML. There's a Missouri University NORML. We've got Springfield, Joplin NORML at joplin-normal.org. And the state of Missouri has statewide marijuana conferences amongst all of those state representatives to strategize and formulate how they're going to go about passing medical marijuana. I do believe they're going to have better luck this time with the new makeup of the Missouri State Legislature. But again, anytime we start to look at states in the South, it is going to be a tough battle. I encourage all activists out there to make this a personal battle. One thing that we found is that people will react much more to a single face, a single story, than they will a bunch of statistics or a mass problem. One perfect example of this is when you look at the attempts to help starving refugees or starving people in Africa. When you do a commercial about how many millions of people are starving or millions of people are suffering, people see that and they go, oh my God, it's so big. There's just no way. There's no way I could deal with it. It's just too big. It's too much. But if you show them the picture of one child, one starving person, then people will act because they can say, well, I can help this person. I can help this one person. So activists in Missouri, if you're fighting for medical marijuana, I'd encourage you not to point out all the statistics to the legislators, not to point out how many thousands of people would be helped by medical marijuana in Missouri, despite the fact that's all true. But put it to a person. Put it to a personal story, a person's face. Have one person in a wheelchair or one person with MS or one person with AIDS or some serious debilitating disease and make that legislator say no to that one person. It's a whole lot harder and therefore much easier for us to get medical marijuana passed.
And in Olympia, Washington, the mayor pro tem, which is the vice mayor, has been arrested for investigation of marijuana trafficking. Joe Heyer, the Olympia, Washington official, was arrested on Thursday night at his home. It is being reported that a confidential informant had purchased cannabis at least twice from the councilman during controlled buys. He's out of jail now after posting the $20,000 bail. The New Tribune is reporting that members of the downtown business community have come out in support of Councilman John Heyer, some commenting about all the good things he has done for the community. On Friday, Heyer announced his plans to take a leave of absence from the seat he won by a wide margin last year. Heyer has been planned to be formally appointed as a city treasurer scheduled for March 1st, but his arrest raises serious doubts he is still eligible for the position. Yesterday, Thurston County Democrats announced their support of Councilmember Heyer, saying that they are not planning on withdrawing his name as the nominee for treasurer unless they become constitutionally obligated. Not surprisingly, others are calling for him to resign.
Well, a situation like this smacks a lot of political retribution and underhandedness here. Anytime I hear of a marijuana case that involves a confidential informant, otherwise known as a snitch, I always have my doubts as to the veracity of the claims. Especially when we're talking about a political person, someone who's a mayor pro tem, and in a state where they are making significant strides toward the legalization of marijuana. Already we've seen the city attorney in Seattle declare that he is no longer going to prosecute any sort of minor marijuana possession offenses. We've already heard that from him. We've also got, of course, the decrim and legalization bills that were championed by the ACLU that made it farther than they've ever made it, even though they didn't make it through the legislature this year, and the I-1068 initiative in Washington state to legalize outright. So it sounds to me as if our opponents in law enforcement are trying some pretty underhanded tactics to try to stifle the dissent on this issue and to try to take down some of the good people who are trying to make positive changes in marijuana law reform.
It only comes twice a day, but I don't care. It's 420 somewhere.
All right, it's time for our Cannabis Community Calendar, which you can find at norml.org/calendar. On Monday, February 22nd, it's a grassroots evening at the University of Wisconsin-Waukesha. This will be sponsored by Wisconsin NORML, and for more information, check out livestream.com/WIMMJ community. That's livestream.com/WIMMJ community. That'll be tonight. Madison NORML is having their meeting tonight as well to discuss the Jackie Rickert Medical Marijuana Act and how to ensure the Senate committee will pass this on for a vote. For more information on this, check out Madison NORML. You can find them at myspace.com/Madison NORML. You can find them at madisonnormal.org and follow them on Twitter at Madison NORML. Tuesday, we've got nothing scheduled on the calendar, but Wednesday, there is a state capitol medical marijuana lobby day at the Wisconsin State Capitol in favor of the Jackie Rickert Medical Marijuana Act. Contact Gary Stork or anybody at Madison NORML, again, at the aforementioned madisonnormal.org. University of New Hampshire NORML will be screening Busted, a Citizen's Guide to Police Encounters on Wednesday, February 24th at the MUB2 room. There will be a general meeting for CSU Fresno NORML at the Family Food and Science Building, room 216A. And Kansas City NORML is taking part in Weed Wednesdays on the last Wednesdays of the month, this Wednesday at KKFI.org. That's a radio station, KKFI in Kansas City. For more information, check out kcnormal.org. On Thursday, February 25th, the University of New Hampshire NORML is having a meeting at MUB 334. And this Friday, February 26th, Pittsburgh NORML is having a fundraiser in support of House Bill 1393. For more information, contact Patrick Nightingale at pknlaw@mac.com or check out pittsburghnormal.org. On Saturday, February 27th, there is a THC tour, also known as the Talking Hemp and Cannabis Tour, playing at the McMillan Memorial Library in Madison, Wisconsin for the Jackie Rickert Medical Marijuana Act. For more information, contact Jay Selthoffner at IMMLY in the field at yahoo.com. That's IMMLY, as in, is my medicine legal yet? IMMLY in the field at yahoo.com, or you can call 920-410-2920. Oregon NORML on Saturday will be having their twice-monthly cardholders meeting at the Village Ballroom at 700 Northeast Deacon in Portland, Oregon. This is open to all medical marijuana patients who are members of Oregon NORML. We will also be streaming the feed from the meeting live on my personal stream at Radical Russ. So stickem.com/Radical Russ, Saturday, noon Pacific time. Also on Saturday, Kansas City NORML will be having a public meeting at 4010 Pennsylvania Avenue in Kansas City, Missouri. That's our Cannabis Community Calendar for the day, and for more information, you can check out the Cannabis Community Calendar at norml.org/calendar. All that special noise means that it's a special time of day. It's 20 after the hour, time for our first break, and when we come back, we'll be getting your Roots Monday Daily Toker Tune.
It's 20 after the hour, and we have to take a short break, if you know what I mean. Please support these sponsors who support NORML Show Live.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would say to South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Law420.com. Hello, I'm Russ Belville, Outreach Coordinator for NORML. In my job, I read literally hundreds of headlines each month involving nonviolent, productive citizens whose lives are ripped apart by a marijuana or drug arrest. Many citizens could avoid arrest by refusing police searches and remaining silent, but police are well trained to confuse and intimidate. That's why you have a right to speak to an attorney before answering any police questions. I hope you never need to exercise that right, but if you do, make your first call to the law offices of John C. Lucy IV. John Lucy is an accomplished criminal defense attorney with expertise in Oregon's medical marijuana law. John Lucy understands and respects cannabis and drug consumers of all backgrounds. Call John C. Lucy IV at 503-227-6000 or visit in downtown Portland. Address available at law420.com. That's John C. Lucy IV at 503-227-6000 or visit law420.com today.
There is a peaceful solution called a peace revolution. And now let's take back America.
Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Like millions of freedom-loving Americans, I'm a marijuana smoker, and I don't think that should be any of the government's business. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana. The next time you light up, take the time to let your elected officials know how you feel. It's time we legalize marijuana and stop treating marijuana smokers like criminals. For more information on how you can help legalize marijuana, please contact NORML at norml.org.
It's time for your Daily Toker Tunes, the best in 420-friendly music from all genres that uplifts, entertains, and informs the public. Our pod-safe music is donated by freedom-loving musicians who support our goal of ending adult marijuana prohibition. Today we bring you tunes for Roots Monday, our celebration of the music that evolved into the popular modern music of today. We pick the best of blues, country, folk, and jazz with a 420 feel and serve it up for you every Monday. Brought to you by PlanetFantastic.com and Bella Blue Tie-Dye Fashions. If you'd like to submit your song to be played on NORML Show Live, send it to us at stash@norml.org. Now, here's some great independent marijuana music for today's Daily Toker Tunes. Well, Carrie, I swear to you, one of these days when I have a free moment, I'm going to re-record that intro for you. It's CannabisFantastic.com if you want to catch Carrie's website. Yep.
Oh, man, I even took your wife off your hands all weekend for you.
I know. I had the studio all to myself, and I went and dropped the ball. So I apologize for that, but we'll get it fixed next weekend. Carrie brings us our Roots Monday tunes. Of course, like we mentioned, these are blues, jazz, country, standards, all sorts of great stuff that digs way back into the history of music. And it's not always marijuana music that we play either. So, Carrie, let me give you a chance to explain what we got on tap today for Roots Monday.
Well, for Roots Monday, I picked out a song from an American singer and actress, the great Della Reese.
Yeah.
In her classic Games People Play, she isn't actually singing about Olympic Games, but that's what I wanted to honor today, Russ. All of the different athletes from all over the world coming together in a peaceful competition, showcasing all the best in us instead of the worst. So today's Toker Tones, here's to the 2010 Winter Games being held in beautiful and marijuana-friendly Vancouver, Canada, and to all of the athletes that have competed. Now, it takes so much to be a top Olympic athlete, but we can assume that taking the occasional toke doesn't mean that you can't go on to win a handful of gold medals. And also, I know, Russ, it wasn't just me who thought that the Canadian design of the Olympic torch looks suspiciously like a giant joint. So, that being said, here is today's Roots Monday tune, Della Reese with Games People Play.
Are you suggesting, Carrie, that people that snowboard and ski might smoke weed from time to time?
I know back when I was a younger girl, I sure did.
I am shocked to hear that snowboarders might use weed. Oh, boy. Here's Della Reese with Games People Play. Enjoy, everyone.
Oh,
the games people play now. Every night and every day now, never meaning what they say. No, they don't. And they don't say what they mean. La-di-da, 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 la-di-da. What I'm talking about is you and you and you and me. Oh yeah. And these games that people play. You know, people come walking right on up to you, singing glory, oh glory, oh glory, hallelujah. And all the time they're trying to sock it to you, baby. Yes, they are. In the name of the Lord. What's the matter with me? God, please, please, grant me my serenity. Let me remember who I am. Because these fools are giving up their sanity. They got too much pride and too much vanity. People wanna play.
The great Della Reese here for our Roots Monday Toker Tune with the games people play. We're right back after this.
Starfish Designs, makers of the original Gandalf.
I'm Radical Russ, and when I want to relax, I always have my 17-inch long original Gandalf from Starfish Designs nearby. The hand-blown borosilicate glass is strong and easy to clean, and the design is sleek and sophisticated. Starfish Designs are available from Bend, Oregon at a glass retailer near you. For locations, call 541-788-GLASS. That's 541-788-4527.
Hi, this is Alan St. Pierre, Executive Director of NORML. We are the oldest, largest, and best-known marijuana law reform organization in America, and it's all because of your support. Take some time to join NORML at www.norml.org. Your membership supports this podcast, our websites, our policy research and analysis, and our annual conferences. Changing marijuana laws is a grassroots effort, and it starts with you, the stakeholder. Join NORML today and add your voice to the millions of cannabis consumers who demand equality with our beer-drinking friends.
For almost 40 years, NORML has been the place to go for the latest studies and news on marijuana science, policy, and activism. For over a decade, one man at NORML has written and reviewed more studies and news stories regarding marijuana than almost anyone on the planet. First as Senior Policy Analyst and now as Deputy Director, NORML's Paul Armentano has written for major newspapers, academic journals, and magazines on the subject of cannabis and is frequently requested as an expert witness in the courtroom. His knowledge and experience are an amazing asset to the cannabis community. Available to you now in a segment we call Behind the Headlines with Paul Armentano. Paul Armentano joins us by telephone from the Bay Area in California. Paul, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here, Russ.
Paul, before we go too far in today's subject, I did receive an email from you earlier today hyping your appearance on a radio show tomorrow. Let's tell our listeners about that so they can hear you tomorrow if you're in their local area.
Oh, sure. I will be on the Alan Handelman show tomorrow, and that will be at least an hour-long segment. We are going to be talking about medical marijuana, and we're going to be talking about these recently released studies from the CMCR. And if folks are interested in listening to that segment, this station is out of North Carolina. It's out of Greensboro, but you can stream it live anywhere in the country if you go to fmtalk1011.com. And once again, that's the Alan Handelman show. That's on WVTK. In North Carolina, that's 101.1 FM, and as I said, that's out of the Greensboro area.
All right, fmtalk1011.com. We've got that up in the chat room. And North Carolina, they had a medical marijuana proposal from Representative Earl Jones. What do you know the latest on that? Did they make any progress on that?
Well, they still have that same proposal. That was introduced in 2009, and the proposal carried over to 2010. Many states have 2-year sessions, so when a bill is introduced in 1 year, it can be acted on the next year. For instance, that's the case right now in Illinois, where a medical marijuana law reform proposal was introduced in the Senate last year, actually passed the Senate, crossed over into the House, passed out of the House committees, and is now simply waiting for a House floor vote. And that vote could take place this spring.
All right. So lots of activity going on. And like we've mentioned many times, 2010 looks to be like probably the most active year for marijuana law reform at the state legislative level. So there will be something for you to get involved with. Check out NORML's Take Action Center. You can just go to the main page at norml.org and look on the right-hand side for a box that says Write Your Representatives. That'll take you to a place where we list all the states, and we have easy links for you to click to contact your reps. You just put in your zip code. We figure out who they are. We also give them your phone numbers, or their phone numbers, so that you can call them, and a phone call is always more effective than an email. All right, Paul, let's get into this subject here, the CMCR report. This is from the California Senate, and tell folks about this report. First of all, what is CMCR, and how did it get started?
Well, just to clarify, this wasn't a report that was prepared by the California Senate. This was a report that was prepared for the California legislature, both the Senate and the Assembly. The CMCR stands for the University of California Center for Medicinal Cannabis Research. Now, this was a system that was set up initially in 1999 by the California state government in response to this often heard claim that there just isn't enough research assessing the medical use of inhaled or smoked marijuana. And you hear this from time to time to time. And while it generally doesn't mean that there isn't any research, what that claim is arguing is that there isn't research that is using the double-blind, placebo-controlled, crossover clinical trial design. That's a design that's considered the gold standard design if a private pharmaceutical manufacturer was trying to assess the safety and efficacy of a drug that they wanted to bring to market and that they were going to put before the U.S. FDA for review. And it is true that there are very few studies assessing the medical safety and efficacy of marijuana that have used that trial design. It's a very rigorous design. It's a very expensive protocol to put together. So in this case, the California legislature said, we're going to put up the money. And they put up $9 million, and we're willing to have the patients to wait these 10 years to get these clinical trial results. And what they have now are the results of 5 clinical trials that have used this gold standard design. And they have consistently shown what advocates have been saying for decades, that smoked marijuana is safe and medically effective to treat various types of diseases. And in this case, we've got 4 studies establishing that smoked marijuana can treat neuropathic pain, which is a very difficult, hard-to-treat type of nerve pain, and we have a 5th study establishing that marijuana can treat the spasticity of multiple sclerosis, and there are several more studies pending, one looking at vaporized marijuana as a pain reliever, another looking at inhaled marijuana to treat diabetic neuropathy. Here's a review of marijuana's impact on psychomotor skills. There is a review looking whether marijuana anyway adversely affects the immune system in those individuals who are immunocompromised, although I would add that the preliminary findings of that study found that, in fact, marijuana did not in any way compromise the immune system in those subjects. And we also have a clinical published trial that came out of this study establishing that vaporization is, quote, unquote, a safe and effective rapid cannabinoid delivery device. So this is not just new research, but this is research that has used the gold standard of clinical design. This is research that arguably one could put before the FDA for review if, of course, there was a private manufacturer in this country that was allowed to legally produce marijuana and put such a review before the FDA.
Well, this is all great news that we finally have these reports coming out, and something, yes, thank you, studio audience, that the California Senate would fund this. It's a beautiful thing. What I've found interesting, though, is the way that this story has gotten framed or ignored in certain circles when we're looking at this story. Specifically, I want to go to the report from the Sacramento Bee. When the Sacramento Bee reported on this, rather than reporting that the CMCR, had these double-blind studies, that proved marijuana's efficacy, they seem to want to put a kibosh on it by saying, by focusing on another result of the study having to do with lower doses of marijuana being effective, and they're trying to frame it by saying that you don't need to get high for medical marijuana to work. Now, you told me that wasn't quite an accurate way for them to review that. Can you explain why?
It's interesting. I attended this press conference, and the reporter from the Sacramento Bee was there, and he and I discussed this issue for a little bit. And I was a little surprised to see that was the take-home message that the Sacramento Bee put out. There were 5 specific clinical trials that were talked about during this news conference. One of these trials looked at marijuana for neuropathy, and they tested head-to-head 2 different types of marijuana, or 2 strains of marijuana that had varying THC potencies. There was a 3.5% potency strain that was inhaled by subjects, and there was a 7% THC strain that was inhaled by subjects. And essentially what the researchers found, that both 3.5% THC and 7% THC both mitigated neuropathic pain roughly to the same degree. They didn't find that the stronger THC had twice the pain-relieving effects than the 3.5%. But what they did notice was that users of the 3.5% THC marijuana reported less euphoria, less cognitive difficulties, things of that nature, than those who used the 7% THC. So that's where that headline came from. I would argue that certainly individuals will feel euphoric effects from 3.5% THC, so that headline itself was inaccurate. There is an ongoing study now that's testing 1.5% THC marijuana versus 3.5% THC marijuana on pain. And if that study was to come back to show that both strains produce the same pain-relieving amounts, and I'd be surprised if that is the result. But if that is the result, then I suppose it could be argued that you could have some analgesic effects without the euphoric effects.
This, of course, is the CMCR report, and it's using these double-blind controls and everything, placebo-controlled, like you mentioned. But we have had lots of studies in the past that didn't go to quite that level, that examined potency and and how it relates to the medical efficacy of marijuana. We've also got countries like Canada and the Netherlands that monitor the potency of their medical marijuana, and it's much higher than 7%. Do you have any comments on that issue with regard to the THC potency versus medical efficacy issue?
Not offhand. I would simply tell people, and this was a requirement of all the CMCR research, that they had to go through the NIDA. They had to go through the U.S. National Institute on Drug Abuse to be able to legally do the study. And that means they had to acquire the marijuana from the NIDA. So that was the source of the marijuana used in this study. Now, the investigators will argue that this is a strength of the study because they had a known single source of the marijuana. Whether it's relevant to the type of marijuana patients, for instance, are using in California is actually a valid question, given that there are no patients in America other than the 5 federally approved IND patients that are actually using NIDA-grade marijuana. But the reality is that NIDA does not produce very potent marijuana. And I believe the 7% THC grade marijuana produced by NIDA is one of the most potent types of marijuana that they have available, if not the most potent. It's much more standard for NIDA in these type of studies to only provide very low-strength marijuana, such as that 3.5% or a 1.75% strain that they typically use. So I would argue that it wasn't necessarily the CMCR's objective or the objective of the researchers to typically look at the medical safety and efficacy of relatively low-strength marijuana. That was simply the parameters that they had to work with because they had to go through the NIDA. And unlike the Dutch government that provides marijuana of around 10% THC to their patients, and unlike the Canadian government that does similarly, NIDA just doesn't produce that type of high THC level marijuana for clinical study in this country.
Why is that? Is there a statutory reason that they're limited to growing 7% marijuana or 3.5% marijuana, or is
no?
this?
No, they're not limited. Mm-hmm. The reality is that the NIDA doesn't typically make marijuana available for medical research. The only reason they made the marijuana available for research in this case is because the requests were coming at the behest of the state of California. Had these individual research requests been coming not under the guise of the University of California's university system, but just individual researchers who were submitting FDA-approved protocols, it is highly questionable whether the NIDA and the DEA, both entities which must sign off on marijuana-related clinical trials in this country, would have approved these at all. So because NIDA is so rarely asked to provide marijuana for medical research, and when they are asked, they are very, very rarely asked by investigators to provide marijuana of a certain THC grade or of a certain cannabinoid ratio, they've never had to go out and grow the variety of marijuana strains that patients would have the options of choosing from, even on the black market.
You mentioned that CBD THC ratio, and this is something that a lot of patients pay attention to, as the THC is the more psychoactive ingredient, and the CBD seems to be more of a pain relieving type of ingredient. And this is something that gets a lot of coverage in California in their dispensary system, Colorado as well. Does NIDA track that? Do they know what the CBD ratio is in that marijuana?
I don't believe that's something that NIDA does look at, and it's a very good question, because as you said, there are several conditions that seem to respond much better to CBD and some of the non-THC components in marijuana than they respond to THC. And right now, it is unclear to me how one could even conduct a clinical trial in this country to assess those components using whole smoked marijuana. Now, a researcher in this country could get their hands on a synthetic analog of, say, CBD or CBC and use that component directly in animals. I don't believe they could do it in humans because the NIDA and DEA and FDA would argue that this is an unproven substance to give to humans, but you certainly could deliver it to animals. That could be done. Interestingly, and I get asked this all the time when you say these were crossover, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials, they say, well, what was the placebo? Mm-hmm. The placebo is actually marijuana that's grown and provided by NIDA, and NIDA has removed the THC component from it, so there is no psychoactivity. What I wouldn't know, and I don't necessarily know if anyone would know the answer to this question, would be what other cannabinoids still remain in what NIDA defines as a placebo-grade marijuana. Because just because it doesn't have THC doesn't mean the marijuana wouldn't have physical effects and therapeutic effects, assuming that marijuana also contained CBD, CBC, and the whole litany of naturally occurring cannabinoids that are found in the marijuana plant.
That's a really good point on the whole placebo effect here. I thought about it from the other direction, not whether or not the placebos would still have all the CBG, CBDs, CBLs, all the cannabinoid families, but in lacking THC, wouldn't the subjects pretty immediately realize whether or not they'd gotten a placebo or the real thing? And doesn't that throw off the reality of the placebo effect?
That's a point that people bring up, and there was a WebMD article recently where a critic of this protocol design, even though, as I noted, this is the design the FDA mandates that private firms follow, he immediately criticized this and said, well, you can't actually have a true placebo with marijuana. I don't necessarily buy that. It would depend on whether you're dealing with cannabis naive or very experienced cannabis users, and this risk of of having the subjects potentially know when they're taking a placebo or not. You run this exact same risk anytime you're doing a double-blind placebo-controlled trial. Most every drug that you give a person has some sort of psychoactive or impairing quality. Certainly all of the opiates do. Mm-hmm. So to argue that because marijuana has some of these qualities as well, that somehow it would be impossible to do a true placebo-controlled trial, in my mind, is arguing that you could never have a true placebo-controlled trial, because there's always the risk that some subjects are going to be able to identify when they've gotten the actual drug based on some sort of psychotropic response.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We're speaking with Paul Armentano, the Deputy Director of NORML, on the California CMCR report, the Senate report on medical marijuana efficacy. And to wrap things up, Paul, what is the take-home from this? What's the next step from the Senate, or how does these findings, where do we go from here with these findings, I guess is what I'm asking.
The take-home message in my mind is that opponents of medical marijuana for decades have argued that marijuana should be treated just like any other drug. It should have to go through this very high standard approval process. Well, last Wednesday we discovered that even if you put marijuana and you rose the bar so high that marijuana still comes out safe and effective. These studies did hold marijuana up to the same standard that all other FDA-approved medications must go through. And these studies, which involved hundreds of subjects, established that marijuana was safe and that marijuana was as effective as some of the best pharmaceutical conventional medications on the market, and it did so using the trial design that is universally accepted to be the most rigorous, trial design that is out there. So we essentially listen to our critics. We put marijuana to the same test that we put any new drug, and it passed with flying colors, to no surprise to all of us that have studied this issue for so long.
It's great news, and we were glad to report it here at NORML. And Paul, thank you for calling in the other day live from that report. We appreciate it. Paul Armentano is NORML's Deputy Director, and he joins us every other Monday for Behind the Headlines. Stick around. When we come back, we've got some reefer madness from Forbes magazine that's just crying to be debunked. I'm Radical Russ. Right back after this.
You're listening to NORML Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Ever wonder how often to change your bong water? The most effective method for baking pot brownies? The best destinations for a ganja getaway? How to hide herb in your car? Whether to grow your own? How precisely to legalize it? Or how something as wonderful as marijuana ever got to be illegal in the first place? Finally, you can find all these answers and much more in the official High Times Pot Smoker's Handbook, featuring 420 things to do when you're stoned. Since 1974, High Times magazine has covered marijuana in all its aspects and wonders, from cultivation to legalization to the herb's enduring and exalted place in popular culture. Packed with inside information, the official High Times Pot Smoker's Handbook rolls all of this collected wisdom together into a single indispensable ganja guide, including an entertaining look at marijuana's history, profiles of herb-friendly travel destinations and festivals, favorite potluck recipes from the High Times staff, smoking skills, advocacy and activism, essential marijuana movies and songs, profiles of famous cannabis strains, comprehensive growing information, celebrity endorsements, and much more. This is truly, finally, the ultimate guide to green living.
Which of you are ready to admit to having used marijuana in the past? And they want us to go around and ask each of you. Senator Kerry, yes or no? Yes. Okay. Senator Edwards? Yes. Senator Lieberman?
I have a reputation for giving unpopular answers at Democratic debates. I never use marijuana. Sorry.
I think you'd probably be a lot cooler if you had, Senator.
Smoke a little pot, drink a little wine. Everything will be just fine. Smoke a little.
Marijuana is an addictive drug which produces in its users insanity, criminality, and death.
Marijuana is the most violence-causing drug in the history of mankind.
If the hideous monster Frankenstein came face to face with the monster of marijuana, he would drop dead from fright.
All right, for today's Reefer Madness segment, an article that Paul Armentano, our last guest, tipped me off to. This was in Forbes magazine. You can still find it at Forbes.com, Forbes.com, Forbes.com. And the article was entitled Medical Marijuana, an Overhyped Drug. Oh, no. An overhyped drug, yes. So this was... Little timing issue there. Anyway, this is by a Dr. Peter Lipson, and I wonder what medical school Dr. Peter went to, because he had a lot of problems with the article. Let me just detail some of these for you. From Dr. Lipson, he says, quote, "Of course, it should come as no surprise that ingesting marijuana makes people feel good. The real question is whether it safely and effectively mitigates the course or symptoms of any medical condition." This is the old line we get from the prohibitionists a lot. Well, yeah, people say taking a shot of whiskey makes them feel good too, but it's not medical. And I get so tired of hearing that. First of all, there's no doubt about the safety part, right? But let's get, he asked if it's safe and effective. Well, first of all, there's no doubt on the safety part. Cannabis is remarkably non-toxic, and in the words of the DEA Administrative Law Judge Francis L. Young said, quote, "the safest therapeutically active substance known to man," end quote. You can't die from an overdose of marijuana, and its most common side effects are red eyes, dry mouth, and euphoria. So safe, we've got down. Effective, we can talk about. Another thing that Dr. Lipson writes, he says, quote, "When I prescribe a pharmacologic intervention, I usually have some data to back up my decision. My most commonly prescribed medications, such as metformin, ACE inhibitors, beta blockers, statins, and aspirin, have clear dosing options and have clear outcome data that support their use," end quote. Well, this is, again, this idea of the pharmaceuticalization that if it doesn't fit nicely into this Western model of pre-measured, specifically dosed, double-blind placebo trials, they don't consider it medical. And yes, there are many, many, many amazing drugs out there that the government doesn't prohibit, like this metformin, like beta blockers and statins and so on, that have wonderful medical efficacy. But the problem with them is they also have some pretty severe side effects. Just this one drug, let's pick one of them here, this metformin that he mentioned. Common metformin side effects: diarrhea occurring in up to 53.2% of the people, nausea or vomiting 25%, gas in up to 12%, weakness up to 9%, indigestion up to 7%, abdominal discomfort up to 6%, and headache in up to 5% of the people who use metformin. So really, with the use of this drug, it's a 50-50 coin flip as to whether you're going to get diarrhea and a 1 in 4 chance of nausea. Well, at least you could take some medical marijuana to deal with the nausea, I suppose. Even the seemingly benign drugs that he mentions, the aspirins, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like Tylenol, Advil, naproxen, and so on, even those drugs that we don't think much about lead to over 16,000 deaths every year. In fact, adverse drug reactions, that is, people's adverse reactions to combinations of drugs, are the 6th leading preventable cause of death in the United States. So if my choice is safe and non-toxic cannabis versus a drug that's got me a 50-50 chance of diarrhea and is part of the 6th leading cause of preventable death, maybe I might make the intelligent choice of picking cannabis. Now, he goes on to write, quote, "Marijuana is not a clearly science-based treatment. Marijuana does not come in easily measured doses, and products that do contain set amounts of cannabinoids, such as Marinol, are often derided by weed mavens as not being as good as the real thing." Well, you know why? Because it's not as good as the real thing. Inhaled cannabis vapor is superior to a Marinol pill because A, Marinol only has THC. Does not have cannabidiol, cannabigerol, cannabichromine, cannabinol, flavonoids, terpenes, all of the stuff that you get in a cannabis plant that's medical. And number 2, inhaled vapor is felt instantaneously, and therefore dosage can be titrated by the user when the desired effect is achieved. What I'm saying here is with marijuana, you don't have to have a dosage. You don't have to say take 1 puff every 2 hours, take 3 puffs every 2 hours. You don't need that because it's so non-toxic, it doesn't matter if you take too much. And since you feel it immediately, you'll know when you had enough. Now, another thing about this, imagine someone who's going through chemotherapy, cancer patient, going through chemotherapy, and the chemo has made them incredibly nauseous, right? So you're going to turn to this person and say, here, take a Marinol pill. Swallow this pill, puking cancer patient. Swallow this pill and keep it down for 45 minutes, because that's how long it takes to digest. And then you'll find out whether or not it helps you. And if it doesn't, you can take another pill and try to keep it down while you're still puking from chemotherapy. And another 45 minutes later, maybe you'll find out that you took enough. Or you could turn to that cannabis patient, hand them a bag of vapor from a vaporizer, vaporized cannabis. They could take a couple of puffs immediately and immediately feel relief from their nausea. That's why whole plant marijuana, vaporized marijuana, is far superior to any pill you can give us. And to conclude this, he comes up and says, all drugs have effects, both good and bad. Marijuana has negative effects such as addiction and withdrawal. We should concentrate on getting the studies to prove marijuana rather than continuing to tout it as some sort of wonder drug. Well, look, 22 million Americans are using cannabis this year. I think it's pretty much been established that people like it. But it brings me to an important question. So what? So what if there are other drugs that work as well or better than medical marijuana? So what? If the choice is me having to go to get a specifically dosed and regulated and controlled and barcoded and marked up product at the pharmacy that costs me an arm and a leg versus growing a marijuana plant in my closet and treating myself, even if those medical drugs work better than the marijuana, why should we be locking up the people who choose the plant? Unless, of course, we're trying to protect the profits of the people who make the pills. And that right there is the reefer madness behind Forbes.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, it, you try it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you try it, you roll it, you smoke it. And it goes down smooth.
I'm Radical Russ for Normal Show Live. Thanks for sticking with us today. Tomorrow on Normal Show Live, you've got Allison Holcomb from the ACLU of Washington, plus representatives from Sensible Washington, discussing the I-1068 legalization initiative. Quite a controversy.
This is Normal Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation.
And we'll bring it to you tomorrow. See you then. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you try it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you try it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.